Hi, I'm Dara Kapoor, the VP of Content at Wine Enthusiast, and I am sitting here with Marshall Tilden III, who is our Chief Revenue Officer and Education Officer, too. Two
Yes.
chief titles. It's a big
Yes.
deal. And we're talking today because I want to learn more about wine cellars. I started at Wine Enthusiast about 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm relatively new, a baby in the wine world, if you will.
Doesn't feel like it.
I've got some questions. Look, I've got WSET level 2 certification. Thank you very much to my coach here.
No problem.
But there's a lot that we do at Wine Enthusiasts that I think from the general consumer or customer's view, especially for new time customers, there's some questions I think we can clarify about who needs a wine cellar. How do you choose a wine cellar?
Yeah.
And I thought we would just kind of hang out on this Friday, have a bottle, and talk what we do best here.
Yeah. I feel like we've probably had this conversation off air
Many
several
times.
times, but let's get into the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
And it's such an important topic, and for so many reasons. And it's a fun topic, which it's one of my favorite.
I think so.
topics.
I mean, just look what we're surrounded by. This
Where we're
is
here.
this is a day in the life of our jobs.
I designed this, by the way.
You did?
I did. Yeah, this was my original design for when Josh originally was doing the Wine Express videos.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Cool, right?
Well, I'll talk to you about the friends and family discount after
Yes,
this
for sure.
interview.
Nice.
Should we
Let's
start
open.
with a
Let's
drink
yeah,
first?
Please, always,
It's the wine
always.
enthusiast way.
It is Friday. So I apologize for the one-arm antics today. I'm trying to keep up with my son and my nephew on the slopes on the board. Didn't pan out so well. So we have what we're sipping here is a 2020 Dolim Estates. And Dolim is a wine that we've had through Wine Express, different vintages. So this is all Napa fruit. 20 is a interesting vintage. People have some, connotations because of the smokes and the fires and was there too much smoke taint? I've had a lot of 20s that are fabulous, and I've had some 20s not so great. I'll let you be the judge on this one.
Cheers.
But cheers. Salud. Glad we're here.
Those are Friday vibes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Right? Now I know
It's been a week, Marsh.
Am I it's been a week.
This is
Now,
taking me right out of it.
I'm going to, let the cat out of the bag about your love for Camus. And so
I really do need to put a disclaimer when he's finished on that.
But I did want to bring something, that people don't know, right?
Yes.
People don't know Dome. You just don't know this. It's not available. And it's a cool wine. It's a really good quality cab. It's got really rich, fruit, dense fruit, nice oak on
beautiful.
it, nice integration. Yeah. And it's like, fraction of the price. So
On finish.
On finish. Yeah.
I'm still tasting it.
Yeah. Long.
I might be taking other sips. More
Yeah.
sips. Usually at Wine Enthusiast, we'll, spit.
It's Friday.
But today,
no spitting on Friday.
That's pretty good. So I think I might take a few more.
There you go.
It's for research. Well, let's get talking about wine cellars.
Yep.
Basic question, rudimentary. We use the term wine cellar and wine fridge and wine cooler interchangeably sometimes.
Yeah.
Can you just lay out the differences between all of these terms?
Yes. I would be happy
While I
to.
drink.
While you drink. Take your time. Because this one's got there's a lot of moving parts here. So there are differences. And it really comes down to protection against the 5 big enemies of wine. And that's the difference of all kinds of wine storage levels, right? Good, better, best. And as you go up the scale, because you have temperature as the first enemy, humidity, light, vibration, and odors. Wine hates all of that for longer term storage. So when you have just a wine cooler or a wine fridge, you're really just getting protection against temperature. It's keeping it at the right temp, right? Which most people, that's fine. You have bottles that you're hanging on to for a few months, a year. You have it in your kitchen. You want to pull it out at the right temperature. Those are fine. And those are your typical wine refrigerators. They're not protecting against humidity. They might have some UV protection. The vibration might not be terrible. And they probably don't have a filter or something that keeps the air clean to help with the odors. Right? Because if you have your wine fridge in your kitchen and you're cooking up garlic and onions, you open up that door to grab a bottle, those garlic and onion odors are going in that fridge. And over longer periods of time can affect the wine. Wine cellars, whether it be a freestanding unit or a temperature-controlled room, protect against all of the enemies of wine. So you have humidity maintenance or control. You have lower vibration compressors so they're not shaking. You have protection from odors, and you have more UV light protection on those glass doors or those like awesome glass enclosed cellars.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, like those glass walls, right?
the
So
baller ones.
the
Yeah.
baller ones, exactly. So those have UV protection.
Oh.
So that's really your difference. Is a wine fridge is just protecting against temperature or holding the right temperature. Wine cellars are taking all of the enemies of wine into consideration.
Okay, but is this a wine fridge or a wine cellar?
And so when you say that cellar, you're talking about that Vino View cellar that's right behind us here,
Right
right?
behind me. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's
Yeah.
got some
Look at that
lighting.
light. It's gorgeous, right?
Yeah.
That is a great question. So this is a wine cellar. Okay. And the reason is because
It's a big deal.
Yeah, because of the UV light protection on the glass. The compressor on these are low vibration compressor. So they are taking into consideration that that wine doesn't want to move. Temperature fluctuation in this wine cellar is small comparatively. And let me just pontificate on that for a second.
Sure.
Because wine cellars can have temperature fluctuations anywhere from 2 degrees to even 12 degrees top to bottom, depending on what it is. On the really basic cellars, they can be like 8 to 12 degrees from your bottom to your top. Short-term storage, it's fine. It's still better than it's sitting in this room at 70, 75 degrees year round, right?
Got it.
This doesn't take humidity into effect as much as some of the higher end wine cellars that will have airflow and can maintain a better humidity. But it does have a cooling technology that wine cellars will cool to a higher temperature than your refrigerator, right? Your fridge is like 38, 39, 40.
Yeah.
This is 55 degrees. So it's not going to dry out the air as much. So while it's not an active humidity maintenance, it still is going to have some better humidity levels than your regular fridge.
Sure.
Right. So is this a full-on wine cellar that's got every enemy of wine taken care of? Probably not. Right. But it's got enough that we can call it a wine cellar. And where when you're having wines that you want to hold and store for, say, 3, 4, even 5 years, this is an ideal wine cellar for that.
So 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Makes sense. That's usually the bucket I fall into with my under-the-counter solution in my house.
Yep.
But then I have this basement that the former owners had wine racks in, and you've had strong opinions on this. I just walked into the situation thinking, I have a wine room. It's perfect.
You do have a wine room.
Temperature control.
It's a wine room. It's exactly what
I mean, like a wine room that's a wine cellar, right? It's all about the right vocabulary here, because I think we're all using interchangeable terms, which is what I want to clarify today.
Yeah.
So your recommendation to me was, if you really want to store for anything long term, do better than just the racks in that room, even if you think it's temperature controlled based on where it's at in the house. How does one level up from the cellar you're just pointing out here to something that would be custom in a space?
Sure. Or even a Eurocov. They have wine cellar cooling units or cooling systems. Whispercool, right? If you hear the Whispercool, they're one of the best, if not the best manufacturer for wine cellar cooling systems. And what those systems will do is work similar to a air conditioner, either a through the wall air conditioner or like a central air conditioner, either a wall hung evaporator or maybe, the air handler kind of system. And it is bringing cool air into that space. It is removing the warm air out. So there's an intake and an exhaust at the same time. And those rooms have to be built out a certain way. So your room downstairs, I am sure, does not have the right insulation. I'm sure it does not have a vapor barrier. I'm sure it doesn't have moisture-resistant sheetrock.
Are you calling me a peasant?
I am pointing out the fact that just putting even a cooling unit in can be dangerous if you don't have the right build out. Because you're creating a room that's going to maintain a certain humidity. So those sophisticated high-end wine cellar cooling systems are meant to maintain humidity between like 50 and 80%. Now, it's wonderful for wine. That's a pretty high humidity level, and that moisture can get into the walls. And if you don't have the right sheetrock or the right insulation or the right vapor barrier, it creeps into the walls, creeps into other rooms.
Oh, wow.
All of a sudden you get walls disintegrating with moisture.
Oh my goodness. I didn't realize it was that
big problem.
The stakes are high here.
Stakes are high. So that's why when you have a wine cellar cooling system in a room, build out is tremendously important. Size is tremendously important to make sure you're not overcooling the space. Long story short, it basically short cycles the cooling unit, right? If you have a wine cellar that's 1,000 cubic feet, but you have a cooling unit that's supposed to cool 3,000 cubic feet, So hey, get the bigger one. It's gonna cool. It's gonna cool it, and it's gonna turn off. And it's gonna cool it, and it's gonna turn off because it thinks it's cooling a bigger space. And you end up having these wine cellar cooling unit issues where the engine, the compressor short cycles, and you never have the right maintenance of temperature. It gets cold, gets warm, it fluctuates a little bit more. So to go back to what those cooling units do and what the difference is of a room, that's the difference.
Right.
Right? A wine room is beautiful racking. Looks awesome, right? But without the cooling unit, wine at 70 to 75 degrees over after 6 months, a year, you're cooking some of your wine.
Okay.
Maybe not all of it.
So it's okay for short-term storage if you're just keeping something for less than a year to entertain and you have overflow. Keep it in a wine room that maybe doesn't have a sophisticated cooling unit or cooling system.
Yep.
But
Look
how
at you, you're
long?
getting the terms already.
You're
right?
such a good professor, and I'm such a good
Yeah,
student.
of course.
So,
Clearly.
and also this wine's helping, obviously. But what I was going to ask is how long, if I'm going to invest
Yeah.
in a really sophisticated custom cooling system, so I have a wine room that is baller, if you will, like real fancy, doesn't destroy my house. How long will how long should I be collecting wine for? Like, what am I storing for 20 years? Am I storing for 10 years?
How much time do you
100
have?
years? Yeah. I mean,
I mean,
who are the people? Like, what is
Yeah.
your market for that kind of solution?
So, I mean, I could answer this in like 20 different ways, but
Cool.
yeah. So
Just get another bottle.
Get another bottle, and we'll be fine. So the easy answer is that it depends, and the reason it depends is every wine is different. The majority of wine is not meant to age. The majority of wine that's produced is meant for consumption. It's like, I forget the number.
I like that.
5% of the wines, 10% of the wines in the world are actually meant to age. Now, it's usually the stuff that we're enjoying, like this wine will age really nicely, although it's drinking beautifully out of the bottle, right? So wine can age 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, depending on what the wine is. The question then becomes, are you going to enjoy it? Are you going to enjoy that wine in 10 or 15 years when that alcohol kind of simmers down and the tannins soften and that fruit goes from fresh and vibrant to dried and those earthy notes start to come out? Do you enjoy that? I do. I love aged wine. That's why I have a cellar, and that's why I'm so passionate about storing wine and its importance. But, I'll open a 20-year-old Bordeaux with my dad, and he's like, oh, this thing seems a little tired. I'm like, no, that's all the tertiaries that are coming out because it's been properly aged and stored. So to answer your question, if you have that wine in your room for 6 months to a year, what happens when it's not at the right temperature is it's expediting the aging process, right? So if this wine could age for 5 to 10 years, which I think it could, in 70, 72 degrees, it's going to get there in 6 months to a year.
Fair.
Right? So you're not necessarily cooking your wine, but you are expediting the aging process, and it's going to develop faster in a warmer temperature. And then the problem becomes wine gets to a level and it hits its peak, right? And it stays in that peak for a while. It stays in that really optimal drinking window. When it goes up quick, it falls off quick. And so your drinking window is really small. And if you miss it, then you got a really nice bottle of vinegar that's sitting in your beautiful wine room that,
That's what this leads me to my next question, which I'm thinking, how many consumers have all the information that you do? And in your opinion, are some of them just putting these systems in because they look cool? Because a lot of them are gorgeous. And I can't tell you that I would know how to age something for 20 years and when to pull it out and when to enjoy it. But I can tell you that some of these designs, especially like Under the Stairs, that new trend, are so gorgeous. It's artwork to me. So I would just want them to enjoy the art of wine and the beauty of it.
Yeah.
Do you really know what the consumer's intent is when you are building these systems? And does it matter?
Yeah. Great questions. And in all honesty, it's like some do, some don't, and some have had that disappointing experience. And that's why they are back for the cooling unit. So, that's why our team, why we do what we do, right? When a customer calls in and says, hey, I got it downstairs, I'm going to build a wine room. First question out of any of our wine storage consultants' mouth is, great, how are you planning on cooling that room, right? Are we going to be building out? Because the first and foremost question is cooling, to make sure that the consumer, the collector does understand that without a proper temperature controlled system or room, you're going to potentially risk all that beautiful wine that you're storing.
Right.
Some don't care. Some just want the aesthetics. They just want those display racks. They
They just want
just want
pretty
that. They
things.
just
They
want
want to
pretty
show
things. Yeah,
off.
and God bless.
Yeah.
Right? I like
I
pretty things. Right?
goals. Yeah.
Right. It's all well and good, but that's our job, is to educate every customer that calls in and say, let's make sure that if you have these old bottles of Mouton, you have these old bottles of Silver Oak, these old bottles of whatever they're collecting, right? That they're going to age properly the way you'd like them to. So in 10 years, you're not just opening a really fancy label of cooked wine, that you have that wine that's evolved to where it's supposed to be and aged the proper way. So how many out there are aware? I think more than you know. I think more than you'd expect.
Right.
And I think a lot of it is because they've had an experience. So I can share mine.
Please.
If we're here for, right? So before working at Wine Enthusiast, which is, I've been here since 2005, so there was a time
When you were just born.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Right.
So I had my first small little 16-bottle Danby wine refrigerator, compressor cooled wine refrigerator, not a wine cellar, small little guy. And I had a bottle of Barolo that I was saving for a special occasion. It was in 1990. I think it was a Giacosa. And we went out for, it was my parents, one of their big anniversaries. And I had held it for like 5 or 6 years in this little cellar. Couldn't wait to open it. Right? I mean, that's the beauty of storing wine, is you save it for that occasion. Because, wow, I've had it for 5, 6 years. It's going to be delicious. And I opened it up. And when I opened, I could feel the cork was a little bit dry. I was like, all right, see what happens. And it was shot. Cork dried out. Air got to it. And it was completely gone. It was oxidized. And it was the most disappointing. I'm almost crying thinking about it. It was such a disappointing.
YOLO, man.
It was terrible. It was terrible. It was a disappointing feeling.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, I just never want to have that again. Right. And so I figured out, I looked up ways, how do I get humidity into my wine cellar? And, you can get like a wet sponge and put it in like a little Tupperware. There's ways to makeshift, right? And I just, I said to myself that once I could get a collection, I wanted to make sure I really stored it properly for those wines that I wanted to age. And that's what I recommend, and I have, our team recommend, is don't think about your entire collection, because the majority of your collection, you're probably going to drink in 6 months or a year, and it's going to be fine. But what about those 1 or 2 bottles that you're planning on aging for 5 or 10 years? Because those are the ones that need the best protection. And those are the ones you have to think about when you're thinking about your wine storage options.
So if a customer is interested in exploring their options and they don't know where to start, just walk me through the process of, I want to go to Wine Enthusiast. I need a wine storage solution. I want it to be temperature controlled. I'm thinking I want something more designed. What's that process?
Yeah.
Does the consumer do?
So the first question, they do exactly that, right? They look at our catalog, they're looking online, and say, yeah, I got however many bottles that I need to store. Let me, figure out what we need here. And so, the first question that we'll always ask is, how many bottles do you have, right? What's your collection? Is it 20 bottles, is it 50 bottles, 500 bottles? Because you always want to get a storage solution that's a little bit bigger than what you have, because you'll always outgrow what you have. Whatever you have, it's a right. Rob knows. You get a 50 bottle cellar, you get a 100 bottle cellar. At some point, you'll have 10 bottles on top of the cellar. You'll have 30 bottles sitting next to it. You always outgrow whatever cellar it is. So you want to get something that's probably 20 to even 50% more than what your current storage is. So you figure out your capacity. Then, do you have a room set in mind? Are you planning on building a wine cellar? And if you are, we want to discuss all that goes along with it. This is going to be a construction project. You're going to have to build out a room with a certain kind of material, a certain kind of insulation. We're going to need vapor barriers. We're going to need to construct the right cooling unit space and have a cutout. So, are you ready for a construction project if you're going to build something into your home? Right? Turns people off sometimes, but sometimes it's exactly what they want. They have their whole basement. They want to take a corner of it, build a cellar. Fantastic. Which usually for like 500 bottles or more is where you start entertaining that. Because the truth is, unless you have one of those cool...
Did you say 500?
500. So if you're under 500, unless you have a...
Yes, I am.
Unless you have an under the stairs kind of like location where you want to build something cool, the costs are prohibitive. Designing racking, a wine cellar cooling system, the construction, the installation, all of that kind of stuff, it's not inexpensive to do, especially these days with cost of materials and labor as what it is. So if you look at a cost per bottle, you're going to be, $20 to $30 almost minimally in building a cellar in your home. And so we want to just have that conversation and make sure that people are aware up front before you go down a rabbit hole and,
So you're really giving them all the what they should really know and not taking advantage of what they don't know.
yeah, well, because that's the worst,
Do you
right?
really want to do this?
Yeah, right. It's the worst experience, and the other reason is that if you have a few hundred bottles, 2, 3, 400 bottles, there's a lot of great wine storage, cellar, refrigerator, store,
Right.
freestanding. We used to call them freestanding wine cabinets, but it is a really good descriptor, right? It's a cabinet, a temperature control wine cabinet. You figure out your capacity. You got 400 bottles. You need a couple of units. They look beautiful. They come in the house. They bring it in, and you're done in a day. Building a wine cellar is a project. Now, it's a room in your house. It's a sense of pride. It's a sense of pleasure. It's an entertaining area, all those kind of things. So, but we just want to lay out, okay, here's what option A is going to be with doing all this and how many bottles you can store. But here's option B that might cost a little less, give you a similar, if not equal, storage environment for your wine. And by the way, is going to take a day, not 3 months. So that's really the process. And then we get into the nitty gritty. What's the collection? How long do you need to store your wines for?
Wow.
What's your electrical situation, right? Especially for a wine cellar cooling system that's going to be, maybe hardwired into the electrical outlet. So our wine storage consultants aren't just, looking through what cabinet makes sense. They have to know how to design. So we have design work. They have to know HVAC. You have to know cooling. How far are the ducts going to run? Where's the electrical, right? Where are the suction lines? Where's the liquid line going to go? So there's a lot of detail that they will go through with the customer, as well as the customers. Usually a collector has contractors and builders and HVACs of their own that we'll conference call in. We'll have meetings with to make sure that the architectural plans that they're looking at, match up with what we want to do in that cellar section. So it's technical.
And all of this is for free, the advice you get?
Sure is.
So I can just ring up Wine Enthusiast or go on the website.
Yep.
I can find a way to contact these
It
representatives.
should be the easiest thing that you've ever done in your life there. If it's not, we're not doing our job.
Okay. I'm going to check that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
would love a
exactly.
custom cellar.
But yeah, so the consultation is free. Once we get into the design and then there's revisions and things like that, then there's certain charges that come about for it. But to be honest, it's more just to pay for the time that goes into design work.
Right. But to get the consultation, I mean, I imagine not everybody really knows what they need or understands what they need. So
Absolutely.
You can have that free conversation with somebody, 30 minutes, an hour, however long it takes for them to be educated on what they need.
That's our job. I mean, that really is our job.
It seems pretty nice.
And people will do it, years out sometimes, right? Like, hey, I'm going to be moving out of my house in the next year or two. And, I just saw this house on Zillow and it looks like I could put a wine cellar in there. Can we start the design process?
Wow.
Yeah, sure. Do you know how big it is? I mean, we do need some dimensions. You need some basic information to start the process. But yeah, that's what we do. We want to educate and we want people to be excited.
Right.
Yeah, not everybody needs a wine cellar. This is not a necessity. This is a luxury. And it should be fun and it should be educational and it should be someone enjoying the entire experience from start to finish. And that's really what we try to do.
I mean, I'm biased because I work here, but I feel like that's what you all do.
Try.
I work on the media side and I work with Marshall's team more and more every day.
Yeah.
So I get the education. I'm learning how they do sales. And I just know working with you, how nice you are about explaining things, how much time you'll take to explain things, and then the passion you have. It's infectious.
Thanks.
And that's kind of the cool thing about wine, right? It just brings all kinds of people together, and we can still enjoy something for different reasons.
Yeah, and you're so right, and thank you, and I appreciate that, and it is a passion that I carry over that my wife, wants to kill me at times because it isn't just at work.
That's called marriage.
That's all about right.
Yeah.
But at other times, it carries through to her too. When all of a sudden she has a gush, she's like, "Oh, this is great. What is that?" And then, the eyes open.
All of a sudden,
everything
she's interested,
perks up
right?
a little bit, right?
Totally.
I compare it to golf in a lot of ways of what you just said because we can be on completely different levels of what our knowledge and how our appreciation goes. But you and I can still sit here and really enjoy this bottle of wine the same as when you go play golf. I go play with Rob. He kills me. Eh, Dude's a scratch golfer.
Is that why you're so nice to him?
But yeah, all the time.
Rob is our video producer, by the way, behind the scenes.
But when Rob and I go out, we have a great time, even though he beats me by 15 strokes, because we can play the
Wow.
same game together and appreciate the same game together and enjoy each other's company together,
Right.
even at different levels. So that's
And that's
very
exactly
well.
what we're trying to do here with making sure your collections are as enjoyable as possible, no matter what your need is. We have to enjoy
Yeah, it's
this,
all
or we're
about the
doing it
experience.
wrong.
Right, or what are we doing?
So now we're going to get into more of the really fun stuff,
Ooh,
in my humble opinion.
oh,
You said you've been doing this since 2005.
yeah.
How have the trends in
Mm,
wine cellars changed
yeah.
over that time period?
It's another great question. Great questions. Um,
Thanks.
so, God, I almost sound like my grandfather in my day. So,
The water's warm.
yeah, yeah. When we first started, um, storage was wine stores were beautiful, yes, but capacity was king. How many bottles could you store? Right, like if you had a standard size wine cellar, can I squeeze 220 bottles in there? If I take out a shelf, can I get an extra case?
Mm.
Right, it was capacity. And somewhere, maybe a decade or so ago, maybe a little bit less, all of a sudden, and there were always display shelves options, right? You could always put a display shelf. People didn't want them. They wanted the outside of the cabinet to look nice, but inside, they didn't really care about the labels. They wanted to get the bottles in there. Display shelves didn't sell because it was like, well, you're going to put a display shelf, the bottle's got to tilt up. You're going to lose a case of storage in there. Forget it. I don't need it. And then all of a sudden, this label forward, this label view
Huh.
kind of thing started coming out, and there was these vintage view racks, and then the display shelves started to gain a little bit of traction. And I give credit up to Adam to put a finger on that and say,
Adam Strom,
Adam
our
Strom,
co-founder.
yes, our co-founder said we gotta do something with this. He's like, this is a trend and this is happening, and hence Vino View was born. And all of a sudden, people wanted to show their displays. They wanted to show their labels. They wanted to display their labels. They wanted those display racks with those glass walls, and it really hasn't changed since. I mean, this is like you said, you're newish to
Yeah.
this. It's what you've seen since you've been here.
Right.
This trend.
Yes.
And it is not going anywhere.
It's fancy.
It's fancy, and people want to see their labels. And I think a lot of it is labels have come a long way too, right? Wineries are putting more into their packaging and into their display,
Right.
and purposefully, right? It's a work of art, and sometimes they even have Picasso and
Yeah.
the
Artist
Mouton
collaborations on labels.
these
It's
labels.
my
Yeah,
language.
it's amazing. I had Keith Haring did one of these Super Tusks the other day. It was a really cool label too. So that's that's a big one. There was a multi-temperature trend when I first started, where units would be red wine service up top, storage in the middle, and white wine service on the bottom, right? And it's still sometimes used for commercial, but it's really moving more and more towards just aging now, right? Even dual zones and just one of those demystifying storage. All wine stores at the same temperature: red, white, champagne, port, whatever it is, 55 degrees, 53 to 57 degrees.
Oh, no, I didn't even realize that.
And
Because when you study these things, there's
right, and most people don't, and
a
because there's
range.
right, and there's a range, and there's dual zones out there. So
Yeah.
a lot of people feel, well, I have white wines, I need a dual
Yeah.
zone. The only thing you need a dual zone for is service, because white wines are served colder than reds. So if you're aging wine and storing for long term, everything is single zone. Dual zones are still there because, especially if you have it in your kitchen, in your dining room, and you want white wine ready to pull out to serve,
That makes sense.
dual zone's great. But more often than not, what we'll see, and again, another, I guess, trend, is multi-storage solutions in a home. For example, somebody's got their $500 to $1,000 a bottle wine cellar in their basement, but they have a 150 dual zone in their kitchen or in their dining room for wines that they're serving and entertaining with.
Right.
So they're not running back up and forth, right? Downstairs is what they're aging. That's their collectibles. Up top is what they're going to be drinking in the next few months.
And I hope they're inviting me over. This sounds like
Me
they are not
too.
messing around. One other question about these trends. Do you think they are reflective of the wine industry trends at the time also? I know Adam has been great at educating us on, why Wine Enthusiast even started as a company. Wine wasn't as popular as
Right.
it is today.
Yeah.
It wasn't as accessible either. So when you're saying these things, to me, it makes sense. Okay, it was about functionality. It
Yeah.
was about functionality.
Yeah.
Now, I think years later, it's a status symbol. So
Yeah.
not only are there artistic collaborations on labels, but how much of that is a response to the trend of consumers wanting to show
Show off.
off?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a really good point. The answer is yes. I think it does have to do with what, the trends are in the industry. Um, and to your point, one of the biggest ones that I forgot to mention was the glass enclosed wine cellar in the living room, right?
Yeah.
You see it all the time,
Yep.
those are not Photoshop wine cellars, right? Someone's got in their living room on the back wall those display racks, this big glass enclosed, door with the big French doors, and it's a huge trend right now for that exact reason. People want to show, and I feel like it's half and half because I do know a couple people who have this. Some, yes, they want to show off their collection. They want to
No
show off their
shame.
label. No shame. Others want to bring people into their passion, right? Wine's part of their life. And when they sit down for dinner or before dinner and they sit down on their couch, they open a bottle of wine. And it's their way of, feeling like they're constantly ensconced in wine culture,
Sure.
by having it up front and center in that living room every day. And it reminds them. And a lot of it is reminding of experiences, right? When you have a
Yeah.
glass, when you go to Napa, you go to wine country and you go to the winery and you have that wine in the middle of the vineyards with the sun on you. It's like the most glorious thing in the world, right?
Yeah.
So what do? You buy a bottle, you join the wine club because you want to have that experience in your living room.
Hmm.
And so I think a lot of those living room wine cellars and having them out in living spaces is for that reason, to try and recreate
Well, that's pretty beautiful.
those experiences.
Yeah, that's a great connection.
Yeah.
I am sure in your years of doing this, you have worked for celebrities, designed some celebrity cellars.
Code of silence, but yeah.
So celebrities, they could be in the industry,
Yeah.
industry celebs. They could be Hollywood celebs, sports celebs. Just tell us, for all the voyeurs out there, what are some of the craziest, most expensive features people?
So what I will tell you, what's really interesting is that it's usually not the celebs and the stars that want the craziest features.
You're shocking me.
Yeah.
Explain.
It's usually because, I mean, let's face it, we know, people in finance make a couple bucks.
True.
Titans of industry, they got a couple dollars to throw
A little
around.
bit.
So those are usually the ones that are the all out deco, pimp my cellar kind of thing.
Go on.
In terms of, I'll hit the celebrity thing, and most of them really don't want to be shared, but we can just say one of the most beloved, morning radio TV show hosts who lives in New York, was kind enough to let us do his cellar, and one of the cinematic icon boxers of our time is also a wine cellar designed by one of our consultants. But yeah, so I think the truth is, of all the crazy asks and the crazy designs, it's these folks that are super passionate about their homes more than wine. And what I mean by that is, I think of one of my customers of a cellar I designed, doesn't drink wine, but his home, because of who he was and the entertainment that he did and whatever, all the parties, his home needed a wine cellar.
Obviously.
Well, because he had garages for his rolls and his,
I mean,
what have you,
you
right?
have money, you have wine.
Right.
Whether you drink it or not.
Right?
It's the artwork.
But the people around him did, and he was
Sure.
entertaining, and this was what he needed in his home, and it was one of the most expensive.
Needed.
And he's one
Yes.
of the sweetest people in the world that you'll ever meet anywhere. Went to the cellar, right?
Because he's surrounded by wine.
Surrounded by wine. He loved to entertain. He loved to welcome people into his home and show up. But he had so much pride, right, in his home that he wanted every particular centimeter of that wine cellar to be perfect. And it is. And it's something that we've gone and shot and videoed, and you can see it on our website. And he's got, again, I'll give you the best example. He got a glass wall that covers the whole front. Now, we usually use 1/2 inch thick glass. glass does not insulate well. So you have to upsize cooling units,
Hmm.
and there's values and equations that we do. But he wanted 3/4 inch glass. I said, well, so you're only going to gain like, a half of an R value. It's not going to add a lot of insulation value. And he said, it doesn't matter. It's going to look richer, it's going to look thicker, and it's going to look better on my wine cellar. I said, yeah. I said, it will. I said, but it's going to be really difficult to get in here because glass is heavy. He goes, don't worry. I have people that can do it. And that was it. He wanted 3/4. He wanted raised panel ceiling built out of specific wood. He wanted certain, just the detail, eye that he had on every single thing was amazing. And he spent for it, but that's what he wanted, right? So
What's the most somebody has spent on a cellar? Like how high can these prices
yeah, I
go?
mean, we've gotten close to like $500,000 on a cellar,
Awesome.
all in, which is and for
For someone like this.
right, and for now his collection has grown, and he actually has started to drink wine since he got his wine cellar
Funny how that
now.
happens.
But that happens. But when you have a collection that could be 3 million, 5 million, 10 million, when you look at it at a percentage, right? It's like when you have a Yurikov that could be $4,000, $5,000, right? And you have 20, 30, $40,000 worth of wine in there. The equation's kind of the same, right? If you're building a 2,000, 3,000 bottle wine cellar for close to $500,000, you got $10 million worth of wine. That equation still works out to why it works in the home and why it's so important for that particular collection, especially if they're investing and then selling it off.
Right. And for those who don't know, Yurikov
Oh,
is
sorry. So Yurikov is the premier wine cellar that's made in France, handmade. They've been around since 1976. We're their exclusive distributor here in the United States, and it does take into consideration all of the enemies of wine. It has humidity maintenance. It has the lowest vibration. It's got the best UV protection. It has charcoal filters. So when we're talking about true wine cellars that are cabinets, Yurikov's really kind of the creme de la creme when it comes up to that. Yeah.
good to know for when I have
Yeah, you'll be
the
there soon.
disposable income.
Yeah, well, that's what happens. You go up the wine cellar chain just like
I
anything else.
mean,
You start with a small one. You're like, something happens where, this wine wasn't as good as it should have been. I wish I stored it a little bit better. And then you move up to the Yurikov. And then the next thing you know, you'll be getting your downstairs all built out with a
right?
cooling system.
I mean, my first step has been this under the counter
Yeah.
Wine Enthusiast fridge.
Yeah.
And
the
now I'm thinking, what's next?
It's the
That's why we
it's the
had that
gateway fridge.
conversation about the basement.
It is, but it's a gateway product. It's like anything else, right? I started with a 16 bottle too, and
Right.
it's a hobby. It's like if you I hate to keep going back to golf, but I play golf. But you get your first set of sticks, and you're like, if you kind of like it, it's fine. You stick with those forever. But all of a sudden, if you get caught with that bug, you're like, I need a better driver. I need a better putter, right? And then all of a sudden, your clubs keep getting better, and you
Right.
get the better bag and the more expensive ball.
Your tastes get more sophisticated. Your
Yeah.
budget goes up.
That's how it
All your
goes.
tastes go up,
And
right?
so does your experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So just a couple more questions.
Sure. I can do this all day, by the way.
I mean, so can I, obviously, if you're feeding me, or this is food for me too.
Right.
What can you tell about a person based on how they store wine? Some real just dead giveaways.
Yeah. So there's kind of 3 different types of collectors.
Go on.
Right. They're sort of just like the entry level collector, like yourself, right? Love wine, love the experience, enjoy drinking. You need something just to keep those handful of cases, 20, 30, 40 bottles, right? At the right temperature. And those are the, I hate to say entry level wine drinker, but they're wine drinkers, right?
I'm not ashamed of that.
Yeah. You drink wine.
We all start somewhere.
You enjoy it. You like to enjoy it with your friends.
Yes.
You're introducing it to your friends now because you're starting to enjoy it more. And once you have that small like wine cellar, it gives you that little bit of pride. Like, hey, I just upped my game. I got a wine cellar. They're going to be right at the right temperature, right? you become on the next level to everyone who just got like the 8-bottle rack in their kitchen.
Right.
Right. And so that entry level wine drinker to me is like the one who starts spreading the word of, hey guys, this is fun. And when you put this wine in a wine cellar, it kind of changes the experience overall when you have it at the right temperature and you're pulling it out at the right temperature, because it does make a difference. Serving temperature makes a difference. Anyway, that first entry level, wine drinker, that's that kind of basic, first step. Then you have what I like to call is the enthusiast or the collector. These people have like 500 to 1,000 bottles. Could be a handful of cabinets, could be a small wine room, could be the under the stairs. And now they have a collection where they have a handful of bottles, maybe even half of their collection, that they are aging for a purpose. They are storing for an occasion. They are maybe storing some to sell. Maybe they're dabbling in, an investment purpose for some of their wines. They care about their cellar from a protection point of view, but they are not needing to have it be a big show off showcase cellar, right? So these are people that have like, the 1,000 bottle cellar in their basement. I think I fall into this, right? I have a Yurikov and I have another small one in my kitchen. I probably have 250, 300 bottles, most of which I'm opening and going through, but I probably have about, 25, 30 bottles that I'm hoping to open with my children. They each have a shelf in my Yurikov. There's a 2010 shelf and a 2012
So
shelf.
sweet, Marshall.
Yeah. So hopefully they make it to 21, but see how that goes.
We could just do like the Europeans. I mean,
Well, that's what I'm thinking. 20. So that's the other problem is that
it's just grape juice.
21 years is a long time to age wine. So those wines got to be wines that can age for 21 years, right? So maybe when they're 17, 18, but neither here nor there. So those are some collectibles that I have. And so that's that kind of next level of a collector. And those people are the people that go to Napa, the people that take their wine trips, that join the wine clubs, that want to bring that wine culture back into their house, right? And then you have I don't like to use this word because it's a terrible label, but you have the show off, right? You have the pimp my cellar. You have the person that really wants to show and display not only their wines, but their cellar as well, right? They want that glass wall. They want to show how cool their cellar is because their home is that sort of a home. And God bless, right? People have the, wine cellar next to the indoor tennis court and the media room next to it.
As one does.
Fabulous, right? Like,
yes,
that's what we all,
I would like to go to there.
Me too. And so, and so those collectors, or those, that showcase could be a collector, right? They still might be the ager and the investment purpose and all that, but they may not be. They might just have that cellar in their house because the house needs that kind of cellar.
Yeah.
Right. And that one then ties into what else are they into? What other hobbies do they have? Because more often than not, you'll find those hobbies within the wine cellar or outside of the wine cellar, right? Signed, autographed jerseys, right? Football jerseys and, memorabilia from movie stars and things so they're now taking their hobbies and they're intertwining them within that wine cellar, and it becomes part of that, just that room, that entertaining area. An entertaining area is usually right outside of the cellar, right? So cellars are cold, 55 degrees.
Yeah.
So usually right outside, there's a table and chairs or a dining room area where they're sitting and they're entertaining. And so they're always around that cellar, showing their collection.
Wine is the fabric of life, isn't it?
I think so.
It's got to be part of the fabric of your house.
It becomes a matter of means and space at that point too, right? Because listen, if I had a bigger house, I'd have a bigger cellar and I have more wine, which I don't really need, to be honest. So.
Yeah, I'm sure you're good.
It's fine. But that usually, and that's part of what we do, is part of that consultation is, where in the house is it going? Is it going to the basement? Is it going in your living room? And what are you looking to do? And we will ask those questions, right? Do you want to show off all of your wine? Or are you just looking for a functional wine cellar and somewhere to store it at the right temperature, right? And so we try and gauge where those customers are from the beginning so we know what direction to take them in their cellar journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. One last question for fun.
Sure.
Whose collection would you be willing to lose your other arm to access?
Yeah, there's a lot out there, right? So I don't know. For me, I thought I've always wanted to get in the basement of DRC. Right?
Spell it out for all of us.
Domaine della Romane Conti in Burgundy, right? Is the most expensive and arguably the best Burgundy produced in the world, and I've never been. I've heard stories, I've heard rumors, but that wine cellar, that wine cellar's got relics that go back to like the 1800s of when they were first starting producing in Burgundy. And I've tasted one of their wines once. and like it was knee buckling, right? It's like one of those you taste and you're like,
That's a good thing.
yeah, you can't believe like a wine can taste like that. It's just like
Wow.
it makes this taste like water.
Wow.
It's unbelievable experience. So, you know, it's not a personal individual cellar, but if I could, bring a pillow and a blanket down there for a couple of days, I'd be
Wow.
all right.
And would there be any celebrity or somebody in the
Yeah,
industry whose collection you would just be curious to see what they have in
the
there?
more often I think about it and I see it these days, LeBron's got to have some cellar, right? Like
I would assume.
with what he's doing, and God bless him for being such a great ambassador to wine right now. He really is enjoying it. He's putting it out there in so many different ways. Yeah, I'd love to go into his cellar with him and see what he's got
We
to
should do that. We should
Yeah,
do that after this.
let's
Let's
make it.
find his people.
Let's make a call.
Rob will come.
Video the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
I love it.
I don't see why they wouldn't
Should
let
be
us in.
fine.
We'll bring this
I'm
bottle.
sure he's not busy, and he would be very happy to have
Yeah,
us.
we're from Wine Enthusiasts. People like us. We have a truck.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think
we'll bring a bottle of wine.
that's what we're going to do after this, everyone. So follow us along. This is a new series. We're going to go into LeBron's collection,
Just go
wine
knock on
collection.
doors.
We're going to knock on doors
I
and see
love
who
it.
lets us in. And I think it's going to work.
I think we're on to something.
I think we're on to something. So that's where we're going to go next. Anything else you want to say before we close out?
No, I think it was really nice to speak about this topic with you in this environment because we've touched on it,
Right.
and to have a focus on it and to bring it to the forefront because, the one thing I will just leave with is, wine evolves. It's a cheesy line, but I love it. The line from Sideways that Virginia Madsen says, why she loves wine because it's always evolving and it tastes different. Any day that you would open it, this will taste different tomorrow and different in a year. And that's to me why I'm so passionate about wine and wine storage is I love the journey. I love the evolution. I love to have a bottle of this now and a bottle in a year. And how has it changed and how is it different? And there's just nothing else that does that, right? I know you love vodka, but vodka's
Oh,
vodka.
no, vodka doesn't do that.
It's not gonna
Vodka
change,
just
right?
makes me think I don't have kids for a few hours.
Beer, right? I'm a beer guy. I love IPAs. Beer, you open it young at its peak. It ain't getting better. I mean, there's exceptions to it, but for the most part, beer's going downhill or getting skunked if you're in the wrong temperature. There's nothing like wine that elicits that emotion. There's nothing like properly having the right environment to store it to really enhance that experience. And if we're not here, living our best life with our experiences, then what are we doing?
That's beautiful, man.
Yeah.
I dig it.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Marshall. This has been awesome.
Cheers.
Yeah, cheers. Have a great weekend.
You too. Happy Friday. Thanks.